Welcome to a pair of bookends, the book club you can carry anywhere. We are your hosts and hopefully your new bookish pals. I'm Hannah MacDonald.
And I'm Lydia Clare. Thank you for joining us for another instalment in our debut Spotlight series, where we place the freshest authors and their work firmly on your radar. Today we are so pleased to shine the spotlight on Nicole Flattery's debut novel, Nothing Special. A stunning novel set amidst the glamour and creativity of Andy Warhol's factory as two women start to rebel against the conformity of their lives.
Nicole Flattery is a writer from Ireland. Her fiction and non-fiction have featured on BBC Radio 4 and in publications such as The Stinging Fly, The Dublin Review and The Irish Times. Her short story, Track, was the winner of the 2017 White Review Short Story Prize. In 2019, her short story collection, Show Them a Good Time, was published to much acclaim. Her debut novel, Nothing Special, is out on the 2nd of March, and we are so excited to have Nicole with us today. So, Nicole, welcome to a pair of bookends.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you. So before we get into the book, I always like to ask my favourite question, which is, what are you currently reading, if anything?
I am always currently reading something. I am I'm reading a couple of different things, which is sometimes I do. So I'm reading some Lynne Tillman because I'm writing a review on her, on a recent book of hers. And then I'm going to probably say her, Mieko Kawakami. I'm reading a book of hers called All the Lovers in the Night. I really liked her first book, Breasts and Eggs. Speaking of debut, or her first, I don't know if that was her actual first book, but the first book of hers that I read in English. And yeah, it's great. I'm really enjoying it.
I'm yet to read any, I can't even say her name, Mieko Kawakami. But yeah, I've not read. I've got Heaven, which is hers. I've got that on my shelf, but I've heard so much about her writing, so I'm excited.
No, it's great. It's got like a lovely rhythm, just like a nice pace to it. It's good.
I'm also super jealous that you are one of them people that can read more than one book at a time, which I have the inability to do.
I can only do it when it's nonfiction and fiction. I can't do it otherwise. And then sometimes I quite like reading a nonfiction book because I feel like it's like I read a lot of fiction, and then when I'm writing fiction, I feel like it's nice to have like a nonfiction book to just kind of read alongside it, and you're like, oh, facts, like the real world.
Yeah.
I really, really enjoyed both of Patrick Radden Keefe's books. I've only read 2 now, but Empire of Pain and his other one. What's his other one? About the North. But yes, I think I don't read a huge amount of nonfiction. I should read more, but I'm trying.
I now really regret I passed on Empire of Pain to a friend of mine before reading it, and now I've got big regrets now you've mentioned it.
It's really good. It's really good. It's sort of like, I don't know how he does like distill all that information. Like he's hugely intelligent and everything into like such a kind of readable book. But yeah, great. Highly recommend. Get it back off your friend. Tell you want it back.
Have you watched Dope Sick?
Yes, I did watch that.
Oh God, it's so good. So good.
And it makes you very angry. And the book makes you very angry as well, you know?
Yeah. It was so upsetting, like the way that whole situation was dealt with. It's just really frustrating to watch, especially.
Yeah.
I'm curious now, are you the kind of writer that can read whilst writing, or is that no, books need to go away whilst I'm writing?
I'm such a slow writer that like if I didn't read while writing, I wouldn't read for years. I might not be able to read by the end of it. I would be like so I do read while I'm writing. It's kind of funny because I definitely have had books that I've put down because I'm like, oh, this is like getting into my head like a little bit too much, but generally I can separate, I think. And I really enjoy it's quite funny because I feel like, not to sound like a huge nerd or whatever, but like I really do feel like I've been writing now for years, like, and I'm trying to write writing reviews, writing different things, and I still really enjoy reading. And I was always worried that might be something that might make me enjoy reading less or not look forward to it or make it feel more like work. But no, I actually still do enjoy it. Like check back in 10 years and I'll be like, no. I just watch TV now. I don't read anything.
I want to see another book again. So as this is our debut spotlight series, we are starting out by asking debut authors what their journey has been like into having their debut novel published. And I mean, you have already had like endorsements from the likes of Sally Rooney, and I've read that you didn't actually commit to writing until the age of 27. So I'm even more curious about what your journey has been like.
I feel like I'm like, it sounds ridiculous when you say that I was like slow and I didn't start writing until I was 27. That's not particularly late in the day or anything, but like kill to be 27 now. I felt very old at the time. No, I did an MA in writing when I was like MPhil. I did when I was like 23, and I think because I wrote stories there at that time, I didn't publish any of those stories that I wrote for my kind of final year thesis, because I didn't know what I was writing about or like who I was writing for, or not that I think you have to like think about who you're writing for, but I had no voice of my own, I think. It was very imitative. It was very in line with like a sort of like Irish tradition that I didn't necessarily. I think you write a certain way to be taken seriously, and I couldn't follow that. Like I was writing these kind of like short stories about young men who were heartbroken or whatever, and like old men who were alcoholics and stuff. And one of my lecturers was like, "Why are you writing this?" I think this is what I'm supposed to write. It's an Irish writer. So it took me a long time to kind of find my own voice. And like then I left to college and I was working and things, and like experiencing like real world rejection, and it's kind of at that time like struggling like in a jobs market and encountering that kind of like, I don't know, just like real life problems that I actually felt was like very awful to go through, but like really, really good for my work, and quite like the kind of the substance I needed like to be able to like make it good or something. I remember I was like trying to finish a story, and I couldn't finish the story, and it was the last story in my collection, and a friend of mine was like, I need to finish this, I have to hand my like manuscript in, and she was like, you need to like either get a bad job or have a bad breakup. I was like, I'm supposed to go out with these things in mind, and she's like, yeah, but that's when you work best, that's when you're funniest. Do these things. So it was like useful to me to have like real life kind of experience. I don't think I couldn't have written a good short story at 23. I certainly couldn't have written a novel. I know other people can and things, but yeah, so it took me like a little while, but all of it was worthwhile. I feel like the meandering and the little bits of writing you do and things, it all adds up to something. Yeah, so then I worked on a collection for the Stinging Fly, which is a small press in Dublin, a small press with big outreach and big results. And that was published when I was like 29, 30, and then I decided to. Well, not decided. I had already sold the novel, so I had to write it. But I didn't decide, trust me. But I found that it was time to write a novel. I'd always been quite like, I don't know if other writers feel this way. I have been quite like put off the idea of writing a novel. I found the task quite daunting. The idea of like giving so much time to something that might not necessarily work. Like with a story, you can write it for, like stories also take time. You can write it for 6 months, 7, like, and then be suddenly like, oh, it's not coming together in the kind of way I've hoped. That's happened to me. Like I have stories that I've never published and things like that. But the idea of like giving like, a novel like 3 years and then to be kind of like, I don't think this is going to work, was like really frightening to me. And I really felt like I had to, gain the confidence to kind of do that. And only did I feel like confident to kind of do that until I was like in my 30s, and now I did write one, and someone will tell me if it works or it doesn't work.
It definitely works.
100%, we can attest to that.
Yeah.
Good.
I think it was Jessie Burton that said that she'd written 60,000 words or something and then just deleted it all because she hated it. And I was like, oh, like the thought of deleting 60,000 words, like how much time and no, the thought makes me feel sick.
It is quite frightening, and then it's one of those things that's like very freeing. But I deleted a lot of stuff from this book. Like I have first drafts of chapters and things that just didn't go in. I have a whole chapter set somewhere completely that like but just didn't know what I just took out. And you're kind of like, I need to include it. I need to find a way to include it. And then if you just take it out and you're like, you sit with it like for like a few days or whatever, you're like, I made the right decision. It's once again like a breakup. I'm going to bring everything back.
Do you when you're deleting stuff, do you like cut and paste it into like a separate document so that you
I have this.
Okay.
Separate,
I didn't know if you just completely got rid of it. I was like, no, you might want it one day.
I have it somewhere.
But I am the kind of person that would keep something for years and years, and it'd be like, Hannah, you probably don't need it at this point, but what if I do? What if I do? So you never know.
You're so right. Yeah, and I did keep it. But what I was trying to do was like hugely ambitious, and then I think I was just sort of like rein it in like a little bit, and then everything around it started to make a bit more sense.
I think it's so inspiring as well that you didn't start. I mean, I know you said before like that 27 sounds so young, but like I'm 28 now, and I mean, me and Lydia are both actors, and we constantly have that typical creative existential crisis where you're like, am I ever gonna make it? Like, what am I doing with my life? Like, it's such a weird age to be at. So to hear that like your career really took off at that age, like that's really inspiring to hear, I think.
No, and I agree. I think it's terrible, like, you know, and it's only intensified in the last 8 to 10 years, like this idea of like success and productivity, and we all have to achieve these things by like a certain age, and kind of depressing, like, and like I said, like it's not like writing isn't a linear path. Like you don't sit down someday and start writing. Well, in some ways you do, like maybe you just, but there's so many little things that happen, and like spontaneous things that can happen that like just don't follow any normal, or like just don't add up to some like huge thing that can be like put in like an Instagram thing that's like top 10 productivity hacks. Like it's like it's against creativity. I feel like it really irritates me, and I feel like I don't know, like certainly like I can say this with confidence, something like acting is like ages, like, but like something like some actress or some, and they were like, it's this picture of Hilary Duff or something, and people were like, she looks great for 35. Just like, she's 35, like she's not 85. They were like, how is she walking around? My God,
it's unbelievable.
Got out of bed.
It's true. It's something we all have to face, unfortunately.
I know.
It's true. We're not going to talk about the fact that I'm 30 this year. It's not going to happen.
Oh,
I'm just in denial.
It's a good one. It's a good one. But I feel like publishing and writing and things that people put like a lot of emphasis on age, and I get annoyed by that, because when I read a book, I don't finish the book and think, what age is this person?
Yeah.
I think that was a great book, or that was a dud, or whatever. Like, so I think that's an annoying little thing that I wish we didn't all have to deal with.
Absolutely. And I think, I mean, hearing about your journey to becoming a debut author is so interesting. And what I also found really interesting was the origins of this novel. Most of the novel is centered in and around Andy Warhol's factory. It's an iconic location for those that know of it. Can you give us a little insight into the origins of the novel and why you chose to set it where you did?
Yeah, of course. So like I said, like I was not able to write a novel when I was younger. And I kind of just had like I had ideas for novels. One was it's a very bad idea. I'm glad I didn't write that. No, I really. But then the other one was I read Olivia Lang's Lonely City, and she mentions this. I think it's in her book. I've been saying it's her book. Anyway, she mentions this novel, and I was like, that sounds really interesting, because I've always really enjoyed anything with like tape recording and like surveillance and stuff like that. So I was like, I'm going to get the book anyway. And then I thought that like about the typing, I've always, even in the stories and things, I've always like been interested in characters who know a version of someone that isn't the version they present themselves with. And I feel like The Factory is like the, like, a space where like everyone was performing, and performance was kind of so central, and things that I was like, there must have been so many people who knew like different versions of Warhol or different versions of Edie and stuff like that. And I've just been like, I'm interested in like how you make something creative, like, or how you live like a creative life, and this novel really like is about writing a novel, like how you write a novel, really, like and then also the I think we always look at like particularly Warhol's, where people like the creation of one man. The only name that really endures, because there were so many people in the factory, is Warhol's, like like Edie Sedgwick is mentioned a bit, but Warhol's is the name, and a lot of to have worked on as something, and like these women did. Now they're fictionalized in my book, but they were real typists, and then to see it out in the world but not your name on it, I always imagined would be like kind of devastating. And actually, I feel like at the time I was like, I'm writing a historical novel. But now I feel like more than ever, like I feel like that question is like really quite like relevant. Like I feel like there's so many TV shows and things now where they're like, this isn't the thing I made. And like, the people who are in charge seem to kind of like have more power over, like you read interviews with directors and they're like, they cut my film, they did this, they put this on it, they advertise it a different way. And like, I just feel like it's a real loss. I feel like if you work on something for years and then it's taken away from you. That was something I was thinking about, and I was sort of fascinating because I felt like I was really challenging myself, and I was like, I was with the time period, I think, but like I really am surprised when I put the stories in the novel side by side, like how similar they are, like thematically and like in their ideas and things. I thought that it's not as distant from it as I thought it was going to be. So I thought no one will even know it's the same person, but no, you definitely my work would know it's me.
I think sometimes your heart betrays you. It comes out and you go, oh yeah, no, that's what I want to talk about.
Yeah, I feel this way.
I wanted to ask about the timeline of the novel, which I love how you moved between, May as a teenager in the 60s and then her in her 40s, sort of reflecting on that period of her life. Now, I wanted to know, like, why was it important for you? I mean, we've obviously just spoken about age and how we feel about age and whether we've made it in life and all that kind of stuff. So I was wondering why it was important for you to show May at a later point in her life.
Yeah, I really, when I started this, my goal was like to show like a complete life. I was like a complete how someone had lived their kind of whole life. I know it's just snapshots and stuff, because I've always really enjoyed novels that do that. And I was like, if I'm going to write one, I really want to write a novel I like, which is like a good bit of writing advice. I think that you will have to stick with this probably, unless you're extremely lucky, for like 4 years, and you may as well be writing something that you like, that you would like to read. So yeah, I did want to do that. I wanted to have her looking back on the factory and like thinking about her like relationship with her mother. Like there's so many relationships in the book that aren't centered around the factory at all. So like I also wanted to show that when she's older, and I also wanted to show the effect of something like that. Like it can be so formative and life-changing, and it was, and it like informed who she grew up to be, but also she wasn't broken by it. Like she grew up to be someone. She went on and had another life, kind of life is long in that way. I didn't want the whole thing to be like defined by the factory, but also reading how to phrase this. But I was thinking a lot about, there's a lot of Warhol's ideas in the book. And like one of his ideas, like main ideas, is like boredom and like making people wait and patience. Like if you've watched any of his films and things, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna make people wait now. I was like, people are gonna want the factory novel, but I'm gonna give them 4 long chapters. Anyway. Which is sort of like, I could like sending these to my agent and things. They were probably like, where is she going with this? But yeah, that was something I really wanted to do.
I think what you were saying before about how you thought you were writing like a historical novel, and then you actually realized that it felt really current. And I definitely think that this story felt really current for me in terms of, these girls wanting to kind of feel like somebody, if that makes sense. They want to have some kind of significance. And I just see that in so many 20-something women that, like, in the 20-something, around that age that I know, I feel like they all experience that same thing of like wanting to be somebody. And obviously we have that a lot more now with social media, that's even more enhanced. But I think, you know, for May and for Shelley, like they do have this sense of wanting to feel important.
Yeah.
Which I found really interesting.
Yeah. And also like their importance, I think something that I like, you know, it took me a while to kind of figure out, but like May really enjoys working on the book, you know, that she finds something in that is like part of her. But apart from that, they're just kind of like you are as any teenager is, just kind of looking around for like someone to like confirm your specialness or confirm like some idea you have of yourself. I think the 60s is like a very interesting time for that, because it really was the, like, you know, with the fashion and the idea of like you as like an individual, like it was really starting then. And like I'd say like the idea, like there was a lot more advertising and a lot more kind of, I feel like possibilities. Now I say 60s in America, the 60s in Ireland was not like that. But I can only imagine, but I imagine it wasn't. I think that would really affect you as a teenager. I think you're so susceptible to other people's ideas of you, and you know, things that you're constantly seeing all the time, like we see now, you know, like it's reached its like highest probably level now, like the like I feel like, you know, there is that opening kind of chapter where she goes to the department store and she feels like, you know, she's in this space and she's looking around and she wants all these things, but that's all of life now, you know, like that you're just constantly in that space, advertising space of wanting, seeing what you can't have, or maybe you could have if you did this, that, or the other, you know. So yeah, I did want to write these characters that were like, I don't know, eager for acceptance and eager for approval. And then, you know, it's quite like Shelley is like a strange character, you know. She's not someone that's like she's not canny, like she's not like, you know, some people are like, even May is a lot better at doing this kind of thing. And I feel like I've known people like Shelley like in my life, like, you know, they want this kind of thing, but their personality is just so odd. And so I was really interested in writing someone like that. In some ways she's like quite like true to herself, but in other ways
she's a very interesting character. And
she's so interested.
Yeah, and I don't want to give any spoilers at all, but I just think she's very interesting. And I'll say nothing more.
And I think what I loved about Shelley in particular and May were their friendship, really, and what they kind of represented with that friendship. So I have got a quote actually. I'm going to be really like awkward and like read it your own book back to you.
I love that.
But our bookends who listen will know that I'm a sucker for a quote. You know what I mean? Like, you know. I am. But this is a conversation between Shelley and May about friendship. You just think you know me so well because you sit next to me every day, I said. I've examined you. And tell me, Shelley, what have you learned? Less than you think, she said. It's not so easy. Come on, you know me, all the dreadful parts of me. You don't even seem to mind them, really. I think that's what friendship is, knowing each other inside out, even the rotten stuff, especially the rotten stuff. That's what I can't believe when I'm listening to the tapes, that all these people found each other, how he brought them all together. It's better than romantic love, you know. It's purer because it asks nothing. It's life's companionship. They're just together, happy. I think a lot of people look for love like that their whole lives and never find it. So they stop trying.
All my friends will be delighted.
It resonates.
I'll be like, stop there. Don't read the rest of the book.
I just thought that particular conversation really highlighted their friendship and what they felt. And I was wondering why this relationship was in this relationship, right? It was so important to include those kind of moments between the two of them.
Yeah, it was. And I was thinking, you know, I've never written about romantic love. I think I'm going to do it in my next book, but I have written often about friendship actually. And the second story actually I ever had published, it's a story in the book, my story collection called Show Them a Good Time, about a girl that works in a petrol station, but it's like it's a fake job basically. They send them in and they work and it's all pretend. And she meets this young guy called Kevin, and he is like where I grew up, like a lot of guys would be like Kevin, like just like quite like sweet, and you know, the friendship that develops between them is like very sweet and like kind of innocent and kind of like life-saving in a way that that friendship can sometimes be if you're in a job that you don't really particularly enjoy, and it's that person that you want to see every day that actually makes your day better, your life better, that you have a connection with, that you can have a laugh with, you know. And I feel like I've worked jobs like that, and they're your person, you know, like you're like, thank God they're here, and everyone else is insane but us too. You know. And I really enjoy writing about those kind of friendships. Like no matter how things kind of develop between Shelley and May, I think they had that. She really kind of saw her and, you know, was her friend at a time, you know, in a place where friendship was such a tenuous kind of thing. And it was interesting because I've read so much about the friendships, the life in the factory and that time, and it's all in A, you know. And I don't doubt that, like, for this is only me speculating, but like those friendships were real for like a long time. And I'm sure that was when things were, it sounds sentimental, but I'm sure that was when things were like the best, you know, like when you were like actually making stuff with your actual friends, and it wasn't about achieving some kind of goal or, you know, being seen with the right person, which is what it kind of developed into later. So yeah, I'm always kind of thinking about friendship and what it means, and you know, how to be good at it. Maybe I'm not, though. I don't know. All my friends will email in and say, no.
It's not.
It's at a pair of bookends at Gmail.
Don't.
No, but I love that, exploring friendships within the workplace, because the crab claws are coming out, Lydia.
What we feel when we're passionate.
These seem to come out. But you know, I worked in hospitality for about a decade, and I think without those friendships that I made there, I probably would have like flung myself out of a nearby window. Like, it was just I think those friendships are so like significant, and so like, I don't know, you just feel like somebody gets you, and it's strange because it's somebody that you see every day at work, but actually like you have a different sort of relationship with them to you do with your friends outside of work, if that makes sense. Which I find really interesting, like that dynamic, because you feel like these people, especially when I was working hospitality, like you'd go through like hell together on shift. And it was like, did we just imagine that? Like it's like the only other person in the world that gets it.
And also it's someone you're thrown together with. Like, you know, in any other circumstances, like May would never have met Shelley. Like she probably wouldn't. Like she would have stayed with Maud or any of those other kind of women. And I think it's so unusual now, because everything's so kind of catered to, and like we're all kind of put in like our little groups, and that like you get thrown into like a world where it's full of people you would never meet, like, you know, normally, and then bonds develop that like can really surprise you, you know. And I think it's great. I really do. Like work friendships, work crushes, they get you through.
Work crushes. Oh, can you write a book about work crushes next? I'd like that.
I will. Now I work on my own all day.
Flirting with the keyboard, you know.
Waiting for the postman.
So another thing that I think is so significant in the book is mother-daughter dynamics, and I have spoken about this on the podcast before, and the listeners are probably bored of me speaking about it, about how much I believe a parent's behaviour can influence the trajectory of their child's life. And I think specifically between a mother and daughter, there's something that's just like seemingly more complex, which I definitely observed between May and her mother, and also Shelley and her mother. Again, no spoilers. But what do you think these girls see in their mothers that makes them so eager to flee the nest?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've always, I think, once again, going back to circulation, there is stories in the book about mother-daughter relationships, and I think I will always it's one of those things that I think I will probably always return to. Several of my favorite books are about mother-daughter relationships and things.
Give us the recommendations, please.
Oh, of course. So one, the Copenhagen trilogy, but Tove Diffletson, that's a writer I really love. It's her first book, and it's about, well, actually I think her mother's in the second one as well, and it's just kind of the relationship between them. But then there's another called Fierce Attachments by Vivian Gornick. And then if you haven't read Gwendolyn Riley, have you heard of it? Oh,
No, I've not read any of it. No.
well, that's the more cruel side of it. But yeah, she writes mothers and daughters brilliantly, and the kind of push and pull between them. I mean, I think that the real motivating thing for May is that she doesn't want to be like her mother. And I think that's lots of us when we're growing up with our parents. We look at them and we're like, I don't want to be like that. I want to do something different. I want to go here. I want to go there. You never do that. And you know, even now, like I feel like I've had more opportunities than my parents, like to travel and do certain things, you know, certain things that they probably wouldn't have. And I feel like, yeah, like it's just really, it can be very difficult, I think, trying to establish yourself like apart from your mother as well, you know. Yeah, it was very interesting to kind of start writing the May and her mother dynamic, because I did write the first chapter, like parts of the first chapter quite early, and it took me a little while to kind of figure out what the dynamic was going to be between them. And then I really ended up like having a lot of kind of sympathy for her mother, in the same way that I like like she's caught in this kind of like changing culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like more than ever now that I'm like, I'm caught in a changing culture and I'm getting older. I don't understand it. So like, I had more sympathy for her mother than I expected to have.
Yeah.
And you know, she's a single parent and trying to do the right thing, but also like trying to be your own person. And I feel that, like, you know, that kind of mother that she is, you know, she'd be quite like, you see it on screen all the time. She comes in drunk, she has like a boyfriend and things like that. I'm trying to do something like, I don't know if I succeeded, but a little bit deeper than that. And yeah, as regards Shelley and her mother, once again, that driving force would have been to like get away in some way, like perceiving like her mother had like, you know, failed and well, not to give anything away, but lying to her and whatnot. But I wonder, like, yeah, I'm curious if I will always write about these things. If I became a mother myself, then like have to see it from the kind of other side and things. But yeah, sorry, very rambling answer there.
No,
I really
not at
was
all.
thinking there.
We love a ramble. We love
Yeah.
a ramble.
Yeah, I am
Alright.
queen of rambling, so don't worry. No, I love reading about complex mother-daughter relationships. I don't want, it would bore me to read about a perfect mother-daughter relationship, because I don't feel like that's true to life.
There is not one.
I'd be really, I'd be like, you're lying to me. Surely not. Like, it's like I loved, can never say her name properly, Eleanor Ferrante's the lost daughter.
I haven't read that actually, or seen it. Yeah.
It's so good, and the film is great. Like Jessie Buckley's performance is just fantastic, and her performance alone is exactly what I'm talking about. It's the more complex side of motherhood that we don't always get to see, which I really appreciate. But yeah, I really love the way that you explored that dynamic between May and her mother, because you could definitely see her trying to distance herself from her mother, but you could still sense that, you know, she loved her mother, but it was just kind of I don't want to end up like that, so I'm gonna keep
and I think it's also this thing of like, it's really hard at that age to like see your parents as people, as like actual people who have like, you know, had disappointments of their own or failed in like ways of their own and things. And I think that like that was something else I wanted to show with the older, like, I think by the time they reconnect, I think she sees her as like a different, as something else, and that just happens when you get older. I think it's very interesting. It really changes things, you know. Yeah,
I found that a lot of the novel was kind of centered around, you've touched on it before, but like identity and reinvention of you know, self, especially again, we're talking about May distancing herself from her mum, but she's also distancing herself from that whole life almost. And I think that, you know, this sense of reinvention, it plays such a key role in May's life choices and her decisions. I was wondering if maybe you could give us more of an insight into why you wanted that to be a part of May's journey.
Well, once again, like, I think like reinventing the self, like that's such a Warhol idea, like the king of reinvention, basically, you know, like he transformed himself, like from what he perceived he was lacking, like as a young boy, teenage boy, even when he he styled himself, he made himself into that person. Like, and I feel that like in the book I was quite torn, and I actually think that's like when you get the most interesting stuff out of a writer, when you feel like they're not coming down like on one side or the other. Like I feel quite like energized by the idea of like self-invention. I think you should be allowed to invent yourself. Like I feel like that's what life's all about. Like if you can't go out and leave your parts of yourself behind and like try on new things. I'm not fully attached to this idea of like the authentic self, but I also think there's something lost there as well. Like, and I feel like certainly, like I was talking about this with someone recently, but I was thinking like, you know, with class and stuff, like what May really wants to leave behind is like the idea of like her small apartment that she shares with her mother, and her mother's like strange friend who's also her friend, and like this idea of like poverty, and she wants to transcend that. And like I feel that is just like she wants to change class, move class. And like that's not talked about, you know, everything's always like rise, and never think about like what you're leaving behind. But when you move class, or you leave your hometown, or where you started, like you can't go back either. So you lose something as well. Like and I think that like Shelley's really feeling that in the book. Like, you know, you can't ever get back there. And if you achieve something like that and it turns you into a different person, that's where you are then, even if you don't feel entirely comfortable there either. Like, so I was thinking about both those sides of like self-invention, which is like I find like self-invention such like a fun idea. And like I said, like you should be allowed to do it. Like it would be miserable. Like if it was otherwise, like what would we all be doing? Like wearing sacks and, you know, just walking around being the self we were born, wherever, living in our hometowns and things. It's dull. But then I also think there's this other side, and it's like it's a really interesting idea. But yeah, it was something I knew I wanted to explore quite early in the writing process. Like I want to think about this.
I mean, class is one of mine and Lydia's favorite topics.
Yeah.
We mentioned class quite a lot on the podcast, and I definitely felt like the class situation of May and her mother made their relationship more complex, because May's really wanting to try and make a better life for herself. And I think her mother kind of really resents her for that. It's like, you know, you ashamed of where you came from, or like it's that whole bitterness. And, you know, me and Lydia both grew up in working class households, so we know that kind of looking at people that are doing better than you and hearing your parents say like, oh, it's all right for some, like and hearing that like negative comments about somebody that's kind of above you. But yeah, I loved the way class was explored in this book. Now I really want to ask, and I'm aware that I can't believe how long we've been talking for, and I'm like, we need to get more questions in.
And I'm like, mothers, daughters, rambling.
No, I could speak to you for hours, but I'm concerned that we're keeping you for too long. So obviously it is a tale as old as time, you know, famous male figures exploiting people, you know, women specifically. And I feel with Andy Warhol, I mean, I am really not familiar with his story. I have only read Olivia Lang's book that you mentioned before. That's all I've kind of got to be familiar with him. But I feel like there's quite a moral ambiguity about him, which I found really interesting. And I was listening to a podcast earlier called Bad Gays, and I know they've got a book of the same name where they sort of reflect on, for any listeners that aren't familiar with the podcast, they kind of reflect on figures throughout queer history, but a more darker side of queer history, and they kind of rate whether they think a person is a bad gay, and in their discussion this specific episode was speaking about Andy Warhol, and they even said themselves that they felt conflicted by overtly calling him bad. You know, they felt it was more complicated than that. And I was curious what your own feelings about Andy Warhol. Am I saying his name right?
Yeah. I'm the expert.
But yeah, I was curious what your own feelings about him are, and how that influenced the way that you wrote the book.
Oh, great question. And I'm glad that you're saying it's ambiguous, because I feel I wanted it to be. Because I think when I was starting out, I was like, I need to make a decision about how I feel he was, and like that decision needs to be rooted in all these things he did. And, you know, when I was reading his biographies and things, and then I read so many of these biographies. And then you also have to look at the people like writing them, like the people that were beside him or working working with him later on magazines and things like that. And I was like, I don't trust these either. Like, you know, like I feel he's so kind of shrouded in like, and this is what happens with like any icon or whatever, that like he's so controlled now by like how people saw him and what they got from him and grudges held against him and all these kind of things, that it's almost impossible to get to like the heart of kind of who he really was. So I was like, I don't doubt that like the factory was like a manipulative atmosphere, like, and I'm sure you felt the pressure of that if you were a woman, if people were like constantly jostling for like attention and like who was the most beautiful and who was the most dazzling that week and who wore the best dress, like all of this sort of stuff, which is like exhausting in itself. That was probably all amplified, and yes, that would probably worked in his favor for his work or his films or whatever. But then I also couldn't say that he was like an evil person who didn't have friendships or didn't have like affection for the people in this book, like Onadine or Edie or whatever, because I think when we kind of write about or make biopics about these people now, like Elvis, and I was thinking about the new Amy Winehouse one, I think you really forget that these people were once people, like actual people who I'm sure had friendships and maybe they transformed themselves into something else later. But a part of me was like, really, like, I think I didn't want him to be this absolute evil puppet master presiding over everything, because I just don't think that's the truth. I think everything is more complicated than that, you know. But I do believe that, like in all these situations where powerful men are in charge and things like that, probably the women suffer the most, you know. But yeah.
What a surprise.
Shocking. Shocking stuff.
No. Women coming off worse, I wouldn't have thought that.
Not me.
We can but laugh. I mean, I just want to fit in this question before we finish, because I found some moments just absolutely fascinating, particularly around the concept and the act of sex and voyeurism and this kind of world that May finds herself kind of thrust into sometimes of her own volition. And I think that this book really, really looks at sex with a kind of like non-judgmental but quite confronting eye, which I found very refreshing. Can you tell us a bit more about like how sex or why sex forms such a key moment in the novel?
Yeah, I can talk about, because it's early in the book, I can talk about the second chapter and then we can talk about the rest. But so the opening chapter where she meets the guy and she goes back and she has sex with him or whatever, and she gets up and she's full of confidence and he's gone, and then she has that conversation with his mother. I knew I wanted to write that. I knew that for a while I had been thinking about something like that, because I was like, what is the absolute worst thing that could happen to you after you have lose your virginity? And it's like you just sit there.
I was dying.
Yeah. And because I think there's so much about mothers in the book, you know, like I was like, she has to meet like a different kind of mother, and I needed that person to like lead her kind of to the factory and things. But because the factory was like such like a sexual place, and there was so much like sex happening all the time, and it was filmed, and there was no other way to kind of write about it. But like I think Shelley particularly like has this kind of like strange relationship with it, and like both of them are like watching all the time and like having difficulty participating, you know, because I can imagine as a teenager how that would have felt like to be in that world, which is like super exciting but also like super strange when you're like forming your own ideas of what like sex is and things. So I was thinking about that a lot, and also because so much of the book is about like watching, you know, like just like watching and surveilling people and things. I was like, it has to have like a similar like voyeuristic relationship with sex, you know. But yeah,
I love that.
Well, that's me done. Sex
there you go.
Just what you were speaking about there with the interaction between May and the mother of the man that she slept with. That was actually probably one of my favorite moments in the book. I was just obsessed with it. But you know, for me personally, I thought that your dialogue was brilliant. You know, it was so funny and spiky, and you know, there's so much like dry humor in there. I did read online that you studied film and theatre, and obviously you referenced it before.
Yeah.
And I was curious, you know, whether you studying those scripts and screenplays, whether that actually impacts the way that you write dialogue now in your fiction?
Oh, I think so. Like, I think so totally. Like, I feel like whenever I talk about, like, I started writing, I learned really to write, I think, by writing plays. I started writing plays when I was like 19, 20. And before that, because I was studying theatre, I read a lot of plays. And I always think that's like really good advice for like anyone struggling with like writing dialogue, like stop reading novels for like a little while and start reading plays and just see how they like talk to each other. And not even going to see plays would be great, but also like just reading them is very useful to like how quickly you can get something kind of across. I really enjoy writing dialogue. It takes me a little while of like writing kind of first person or interior stuff, and then I feel like I know how they sound and stuff. But yeah, it definitely helped my work like a lot to read a lot of plays.
I think reading plays is great advice, and we might be biased because we are actors, but
I think it is. I think it really is it's a good, useful thing to do.
So good. And I was so impressed by, I think it's, one of my favorites is Sam Steiner's Lemons, Lemons, Lemons. It's about 5 lemons. And it's set between a man and a woman. And it's sort of a dystopian of, we have a word limit for how many words that we can say a day. And the lower class you are, the less words you get. And the woman in this relationship is middle class, from a middle class background. And the man is from like a working class background. So he naturally gets less words, and she works as like a lawyer or something. So because she's got a more important job, she's awarded more words. And I just found that so fascinating. And specifically, it's so good. I would really recommend that.
Okay. No, I will.
But yeah,
I would be screwed in that world.
Me too.
Like,
100%.
if there was punishment for talking too much, that'd be me. I'd be out the window.
I think I'd be okay unless I had a good story to tell, in which case I'd be like, I'm going over my work here today.
I'd be shaking with the words wanting to come out.
That is true. So, I mean, we're hitting time now. So thank you so much for joining us today. We do really appreciate it. But before we let you go, we're not going to let you actually leave without squeezing every single recommendation we can get out of you.
Yeah.
So we were just wondering if you could share with us some of your favourite debut authors, debut novels that you would like to share with us, really.
Is from this year, or from coming out, or
whenever?
Anytime.
Anytime I debut. And I was like, oh, well, I know there's a Belfast writer book is coming out in April, I think, Michael McGee. That's called Close to Home. I really loved that book. Speaking of class,
read about it. It sounds great. Yeah,
it's really, really good. Very, very impressive. I feel like I've definitely read debuts.
If you're stuck on a debut, just pick anything.
Pick anything.
Yeah.
Okay. I know Larry Moore has a new book out later this year. I've read it. It's very good. I'm a big fan of hers. And actually, on the subject of friendship, I was kind of thinking of 2 books in particular when I was writing this. And one was Who Will Run the Frog Hospital by Larry Moore, by 2 teenage girls. And then the other one was Veronica by Mary Gateskill.
Yes.
And I
read that.
I love that book
so much. Great. I
was thinking of them, both of them, a lot. So yeah, there's recommendations. I just thought of another debut I liked. I really liked Saba Sam's collection Send Nudes. Yeah, very good.
That was our January book of the month.
Yeah, she's great.
Because we adore it.
Yeah, it's so good.
And I know she used an epigraph from Veronica, actually.
She did. Yeah. Yes. And she's also working on a novel, which is very exciting.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah.
But I'm really sad that we've got to let you go, because I've loved speaking to you. But we do have to let you go because you have other things to do. You've got what you're having. I need to know.
I don't know, actually, because my boyfriend's going to cook. So
gorgeous. Nice. Love that.
Nice. There you go.
So, listeners, Nicole Flattery's debut novel, which is incredible, is out on the 2nd of March and is published by Bloomsbury. I will stick a link in the show notes to pre-order that. Please get on it, you won't regret it. And Nicole, can you tell our listeners where they can find you on social media?
They can find me at Nicole Flattery I'm not very good on there. Just to remind all your listeners.
I like the caveat.
In case you expect incredible content, they will be disappointed. Yeah, they can find me.
I love that. And I want to wish you all the luck in the world for publication. Very exciting time. And please do come back to us with any future books because we've really enjoyed this. So
I will.
you're always
Within the
welcome
next
here.
5 years, you'll get another.
Well, you don't realise that when you appear on a pair of bookends, you do sign an oath by appearing that you have to then subsequently always come back.
I will. I'll be 5 or 10 years older every time, but I'll come back.
Listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, please do rate, review and subscribe as it helps to boost us in the charts. You can follow us also at A Pair of Bookends Pod on Instagram and at A Pair of Bookends on Twitter and TikTok. And aside from that, thank you so much, Nicole, and goodbye.
Bye.